Well, we have a morning after edition here of Mic Drop, made possible by the Believe Network, available everywhere you get your podcasts and on SiriusXM. A morning after a Pittsburgh Steelers loss, a Thursday night football loss, 33-31 to the Bengals, that it looked for a while they were going to bungle the game up and almost lost, but the luck was actually on Cincinnati's side on that night. Mike Asti here again, Mic Drop with Believe and everywhere you get your podcasts. And I am going to be joined by somebody who knows the Pittsburgh Steelers very, very well, knows the NFL very, very well, and has a show of his own on SiriusXM. He's been talking a lot this morning, but going to jump back on with me here as well. And that is former Steelers offensive coordinator, NFL coach, current host on SiriusXM, Todd Haley. I think you know him there from his face if you're watching the video, as we are recording this live and streaming live on X, YouTube, etc. Todd, how are you, man? I know you've been talking a lot this morning. Thanks for jumping on here with me. And then I also can add that you're now a part of a new venture here in the Pittsburgh media realm of Steel City Sunday. So we're kind of colleagues again, in addition to this. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Mike. Yeah, Steel City Sunday. Been a lot of fun so far, but not as fun when the game goes the way it went last night.
Well, that's very, very true. Not so fun for Steeler fans right now, although it's hard for Steeler fans to complain in comparison to the rest of the division, which we'll get to here in a moment. Steelers did lose last night. So before we fully get to the Steelers, how they played and what's going on with their quarterback, and then some NFL topics, Mike Tomlin, I'm sure we're going to discuss that Todd knows very, very well. I want to ask you something that people are talking a lot about that I feel like maybe only a coach could really speak on, and that is exactly how impressive and difficult what Joe Flacco just did at his age, and even did a couple years ago for Cleveland, really is. And that is to change teams, switch teams in a 10-day period, have 8 days literally to learn a new offense, teammates, etc., even though obviously Jamar Chase is an elite receiver, and then put up one of the best performances of his career at 40 years old when he was struggling earlier in the season. How crazy hard is that? How impressive is that? How is that for you as a coach? People, I feel like, aren't giving it enough credit.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Mike. Incredible, really, really impressive. What Joe did in such a short time, especially considering the age he is. So you can't understate how learning a new system, learning a new center, learning new receivers, ball handling, terminology, all the different things, even just getting to the building. Anybody that starts a new job, you're like, you want that first month to be over so you just know how to get around. So, incredible. Back when I was with the Steelers, Ben went down and we signed Mike Vick for, midway through the season. And it's just really hard. It's hard for everybody involved. You got to, you're already working insane amount of time, but you got to work overtime trying to get somebody up to speed. But Joe, man, this guy can sling it. I think Coach T kind of manifested it earlier in the week when he got after the Browns for letting that happen. And I think that all was driven by, he understands Joe Flacco could still play. But I thought last night's game in general, take the Steeler fan base out of it and the Steelers out of it, was really a great game when you consider two 40-plus-year-old guys were slinging it around, even right down to the Hail Mary. I had to rewind that 2 or 3 times trying to figure out exactly how far. I'm telling my girl, I'm like, no, they're going to have to do a lateral deal. They can't get it to the end zone, and all of a sudden he heaves it 70 yards.
He looked like he could have thrown it 75. Like he looked like he could easily have thrown it further.
Because where it got knocked down from, that thing was going to land towards the back of the end zone anyway. So just a lot of fun to watch, especially if you like offensive football.
Yeah, an entertaining game for sure, for Amazon and the NFL. They're actually getting solid Thursday night football games. It used to be a problem, still is for Mike Tomlin in terms of winning them, but a really, really entertaining game. Todd Haley here, former NFL coach, Steelers OC, joining me on Mic Drop here with Believe and Sirius XM. Now, you mentioned your situation when Vic came aboard years ago and how you would deal with that as a coach and how impressive this is for Flacco to do that in such a short time. What would have been your first order of business once you're aware of the trade, your offensive coordinator, and to be honest, again, I'm sure you would have been aware of this if you were the coach. I'm sure it had to creep in the back of your mind. Like, I'll admit, I thought, he's Joe Flacco. He's been a solid quarterback, but he's 40. And if you look at the film from when he was at the Browns this year, not so great. I don't know what your expectations even would have been, but what would you have your first order of business and how to work with him in that scenario?
I think first off, just number one, teaching the basics. Terminology is the big thing.
Yeah.
As I said, cadence, how you're, what everybody's used to hearing up front, ball handling, those type of things. But what are you comfortable with? And I've heard some of that about Joe, what he looked like in Cleveland. The supporting cast he has offensively right now in Cincinnati is
way better.
Apples and oranges. I mean. He turned the ball over some, but I can't even put all those on him. There were some tip balls that he hit the guy in the receiver in the chest that deflected to other people. But he is in a great place right now. I much like Mike Tomlin, when he came out and said it, I was feeling very similar. I'm like, this is not good. I mean, this Cincinnati team that got a couple, ugly wins to start the season. Then Joe goes down, and then it looks really bad. But you're talking about two big time receivers. Throw in there that they're going to run for 140 something yards. That was the killer.
Yeah,
because I'm sure
they hadn't done that against anybody all year either.
No, they were averaging 57 yards a game.
Yep.
And I was banging my head against the wall, talking about them is just get under center, run the football, help your offensive line. And when you saw all that kind of come to fruition last night, Joe was under center a bunch.
Yeah.
They ran downhill. I got to believe the Steelers' game plan was, with Joe being new there and things that, hey, stuff the run, make them beat us passing. And when you can do both, when you can run it like they were running it and throw it like they, then it makes throwing it so much easier. I mean, it became a very difficult situation for the Steelers defense.
Yeah, and again, it almost sounds like taking credit away from Joe Flacco, but not to do that. But yeah, his supporting cast with Cincinnati, with those receivers, Jamar Chase had 16 receptions in the game. Clearly, he thought to himself, and the coaches were fine, that when in doubt, go to the elite receiver. It's only been 8 days. He'll probably catch the ball if it's 50-50. And he did. He had a weird drop that it looked like Joe was shocked that he dropped the ball. But he had 16 receptions in the game, and then they finally got a running game that they also really hadn't had all season long. We'll see if this goes on all year. I'm skeptical if this can continue all year, because when Flacco did do this with the Browns 2 years ago, that was at the end of the year for 6 games or so. This would be a long journey until Burrow comes back. We will see what happens. And it does appear that Mike Tomlin knew what maybe could be coming his way on Thursday Night Football, which does lead me to ask you, Mike Tomlin very, very well. Were you at all surprised that he put out what you, him, and others probably would have been feeling in the building to the public, to the media? Honestly, it sounded like he was complaining about it a little bit and like he was legitimately mad. Are you surprised that he kind of let that out? He normally likes to be a little more close to the vest and kind of play with us in media, but no, his feelings are right out there.
It was a little out of character, but again, Mike is a really smart guy. I'm sure he had his reasons for putting it out there.
Yeah.
It didn't work out, but he made his point, and a point that probably a lot of us felt like Browns, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah.
But it is what it is. He does it in a unique way and motivates his group the way he does it, and it's been really pretty successful.
Yeah, overall. And it did feel out of character, though, because it almost felt like he was setting the groundwork for what happened to happen. And it also kind of felt like that he couldn't hold himself back, that maybe he just was legitimately upset. That it almost felt like that he probably sent a text to Andrew Berry. And when they see each other at owners' meetings, he might be like, what the hell? So it really seems like he was a little upset from it there. Todd Haley, again, Mike drop here with Believe in Sirius XM, Mike Asti, as we are talking what just happened on Thursday Night Football. And now going to the Steelers side of things, how do you think Aaron Rodgers played? Obviously, still played solid. Could have had a game winner, which would have been to Freiermuth, who has kind of been out of the offense most of the year. Had a big game on Thursday night. And how do you think Rodgers has played all year, considering even what maybe you were expecting off of the Jets' tenure, his age, knowing him, but still, it's been a while since he's played like this at any age.
Yeah, no, I think he's been tremendous. I've said it a million times with the situation the Steelers were in. They tried it last year with Russell and Justin Fields. It didn't work out the way they probably wanted it to, and now it's just you don't just find quarterbacks growing on trees, especially when you're drafting at the back end of the draft consistently. So. For the situation they were in and for the situation Aaron was in. If he wanted to still play, I thought this was a great match. I know Mike very well. I know Aaron pretty well, and spent some time with him. This is another really cerebral guy that I'm sure he and Mike hit it off immediately.
Yeah, that's been out there.
I wouldn't
say, yeah.
To me, you won how many games last year? 10. Aaron Rodgers makes you a game and a half or 2 games better just for being Aaron Rodgers and what he can do at the line, cadence, all those different things. I mean, he's a tremendous leader and knows how to play football. So, I think from that end, it's been really good. And last night, 2 interceptions, I get it, but I put them both on DK. The go route, whether it should be thrown or not, he stopped running. So at worst, that should have been a breakup, even with the safety getting involved. And then the one he let Turner take off of him on the sideline. I mean, that's just the fundamentals. When that ball hits your hands, you got to shield with your body, turn, and he just left himself open. I don't know if he was worrying about the safety hitting him or what, but two balls that probably should not have ended up in Cincinnati's hands, and then throw in the flea flicker. That was an alert call. Probably called the flea flicker first with the kill to run. Aaron saw that it wasn't the look they were looking for. He alerted it. Warren missed it, and now it was an incompletion. No big deal. But what if he could have held on to that play and got it versus the look that Arthur Smith and they decided, why they had it in the game plan. So
Rodgers looked frustrated on that one. You can tell he wears it on his face that when he feels like somebody else messed up, he just can't help himself.
No, I mean, the lineman tackled him. We saw his emotion on that one too. But no, I mean, it's amazing that it wasn't a disastrous play because once that alert was made, it's now a run play. So I don't even know how Rodgers was aware enough to know the ball was getting pitched back to him. But you got no receivers going out. I mean, everybody's thinking it's a run. So I would have been pretty ticked off too if I were Aaron.
Yeah, and I do think the intelligence factor, the leadership factor, forget the stats. There's just a different vibe with Aaron Rodgers out there than what's been out there in recent years, even with Russell Wilson being a veteran and can have the Hall of Fame debate if you want. But even when he was out there, certainly Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, who's still on the roster, the vibe now with Rodgers is that he's not going to be the guy that ruins this game. If you lose, you're not going to win them all. But if you lose, it's not going to be him. And that, again, was the case on Thursday Night Football. But yeah, he has just a different vibe. Even earlier in the year, there was a play that the broadcast actually was saying, oh, I wonder what was going on there. I forget. It was a few games back. Might have been the Seattle game. And Aaron ended up realizing that it was going to be a penalty against the defense and they were going to get a free play out of it because he basically just chucked it deep trying to find somebody. And the broadcasters were like, what's Aaron doing here? And then realized Aaron was a step ahead of everybody else. He knew what was going on a step ahead before everybody else. Yeah, Aaron has been great so far. We'll see how long this goes at his age and if he can stay healthy. What did you think of his Jets tenure, though? Are you at all surprised that he's playing like this now? Because obviously the Jets tenure didn't go well. Obviously missed the first year with an injury, but even year 2, he was better than the team record, but still not this level, Aaron Rodgers. It feels like he found a fountain of youth here back with the Steelers.
Well, we don't know if he hadn't gotten hurt. We don't know what it would have looked like. But to me, it was just a bad situation, and it speaks to me about the Steelers organization in general.
Yeah,
starting with the Rooneys, but the leadership you're going to get from Mike Tomlin. It's got to be. Aaron would never come out. I mean, he's throwing some of his little daggers, but you can tell this is night and day. It probably feels a lot more like when he was in Green Bay, and all you can do is when you evaluate him is what does he look like throwing the football, and then you got to take all the other things into account of what kind of support was he getting, and with the Jets it just didn't look like very much.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett Wilson was there. He's a solid receiver, but not nearly the support. The O-line didn't protect. It was just a mess.
I'm talking top to bottom.
Top to bottom. It was a complete. It was a complete.
GM, who's the head coach? Is the GM the head coach, or is the head coach the head coach? There were a lot of different voices coming out of New York. That doesn't happen in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it was a complete mess, and you could argue that Aaron was trying to do some GM work, at least early in the tenure. But I do think part of his emergence here at the Steelers, he's just worrying about football, and just worrying about football, Aaron Rodgers is still clearly good enough to help you win games in the NFL, even at this age. If he starts, because he even did this early with the Jets, if he starts worrying about who's on the roster and worrying about what's said, then maybe he gets bogged into the mess too. But that's just the culture there, and the culture with the Steelers. The culture with the Steelers isn't going to let that happen, and that was part of the agreement.
And if you're a football guy, whether you're a player, coach, personnel guy, you know what right looks like, and when you get to places where it isn't right, and things don't look or feel the right way, whether it's practice, meetings, any of those things, it's going to be hard to hold back when you're a guy of his caliber. So. I don't have any doubt. Pittsburgh feels right all the time within that building on the practice field. And it's got to be very comforting for him to, as you said, just focus on being the quarterback.
Yeah, and it's the best thing for everybody for him to focus just really on being the quarterback. It's kind of worked out so far, at least from his perspective. We'll see how the team does. And the funny part about it as well, this really speaks to what you're saying about the Jets being a mess for years and years on end, regardless of who is there. Aaron Rodgers' season, and it was a bad one, his stats were still some of the best for a Jets quarterback ever. He's like top 5 all time in the individual season for a Jets QB. And it was just a complete dumpster fire of a season. So that right there speaks to it. It's not a year for him to be proud of, but the Jets actually throughout their history haven't done that much better than his year last year. Todd Haley joining me here on Mic Drop, former Steelers OC, NFL coach. As we were talking Thursday Night Football, I do kind of want to pivot a little bit from the game itself to what you think this team can do the rest of the year, because there are still problems there. This team is still far from perfect. The division still is very, very winnable. Unless Joe Flacco does this all year long and Burrow not coming back, this still feels like the Steelers' division to lose. Even if Lamar Jackson comes back soon, they're very far in a hole that I don't even think they can really get out of. So the Steelers may win this by default, but how good really is this team? You've watched all the recent seasons, and you know that the fans want to freaking win a playoff game. It's been a while to do that. Do you think this team is actually good enough to win a playoff game, let alone not just get in because the rest of the division's bad?
Yeah, I definitely think that.
Okay.
I think this team is. I heard Ryan Clark talking this morning. That they're closer to a contender than a pretender, and I believe that. Now I'm not saying contender that I am putting them in my category of Super Bowl favorites, but
right.
A lot of things go on during an NFL season. They have themselves in a very good spot, even though they probably feel like they gave one away last night. They're in a good position. It's about fixing the things that are not giving you as good a chance to, once you get into the playoffs, to win some of those games. So one of those things to me has been just, seeing a more consistent running game. So we saw 2 weeks ago, Kenneth Gainwell running really, really well. Warren last night ran really well. Who's number 2 at receiver? With Calvin Austin being out, that hurt him a little bit. But, I said all week last week going into the game last night that I think you got to see the tight ends get more involved, and we saw it. So that's a good sign. Yeah. Now the other issue with the Steelers is, and I thought it was getting fixed, is they weren't running it well enough, and they were giving up too many yards on defense running the ball. So that was not good last night. That no. to play Steeler football, they have to somehow figure that out. Yeah. I heard Cam Hayward come out. He's ticked off, as he should be, in his group. So, but that's the process of a season. It's not about, you got to keep yourself in position, but it's about figuring out a way to fix the things that can get you beat against good teams, and then evolving and playing your best football at the most important time of the year. Every game counts the most. It is important, but stay in the race, which they're going to be in the race, and then fix some of those issues, whatever they are, and start playing your best football. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be the problem. The offensive line is they kept him clean last night. I thought that was excellent. The tight ends getting involved in the passing game. They're showing some beef up front. When they bring in the extra tight end linemen, and they got Washington and Freiermuth and Jonnu, they can bring it at you a little bit. So, but the key is, to me, the defense. They have to figure out how to not allow what happened last night in the Cincinnati run game to happen.
Yeah, because the Steelers are far from perfect, but no NFL team is perfect right now. But the Steelers do have a rough schedule coming up. They're going to see tougher teams. They're going to see the Chargers, the Bills. The Ravens aren't until the back half of the season, and who knows how they'll be then. But they have tougher games coming up. They did have some relatively winnable games earlier in the year that they were able to win despite not playing perfect. But the run game and defense are the two things that if this team doesn't win the division, if they don't win a playoff game, that feels like that's what's going to hold them back. And we will see what ends up happening moving on. That collective, weakness for the Steelers on both fronts really was exposed by the Bengals. It really, really was. That was the worst of the games.
Well, it was a perfect storm. I mean, Don't forget, Joe Flacco, the ball was coming out in 2 seconds. So I know defensive players like TJ and Cam and all those guys, that becomes very frustrating very quick. When you just, no matter what you do, you can't get there. So he did a tremendous job. It was kind of the perfect storm. He's throwing it quick, seeing the field really well. They weren't able to stop the run, so now you got to allocate more resources to try to stop the run. Now you're putting a secondary. Then Slay went down. I think that really hurt because you're shuffling guys around. But it was kind of a perfect storm for a poor defensive performance.
Yeah, to say the least. And earlier in the year they were allowing yards, but then getting turnovers to make up for it. And they kind of a bend but don't break defense against the Bengals. They were bending and then they eventually broke, and that was a problem against Cincinnati. We'll see what that's like the rest of the year. They're still a very talented team, and the pressure's on that defense as much as it's on Rodgers because they spent a lot of money and changed up that defense. And there's a video out there of the defense on Chase there at the end was non-existent. The Bengals only needed a field goal and easily could have scored a touchdown. Granted, they just went for the field goal because they didn't want to give the Steelers time with the football. And Ramsey got beat on multiple plays there down near the red zone, and he was the guy that was brought in. So that can't keep happening or it's legit to criticize, and that's kind of been the case so far.
Yeah, I mean, now you're again when I said perfect storm, all of a sudden you're dealing with Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and a quarterback who, like I said, Joe was seeing it, feeling it last night. Going to be really tough. I have faith in Jalen Ramsey. I think he's still a heck of a player, but they just were put. And then what happens on defense, Mike, is guys start trying to do too much. They've been taught all week that here's your assignment, here's what you do, and that's the way good defenses play. But you saw it on the throw down the middle to the tight end. I mean, all of a sudden a safety that he's paying attention to Jamar because they're trying to keep him from catching it, and you allow a guy to run down the middle for a huge play. And I even think Jalen just trying to do too much, trying to think too much. And that's what they'll be being coached on all week is to just do your job. I know it's a coaching cliche, but on defense, it's just so critical that everybody's just doing what they're supposed to do and then make a play when you get a chance.
Yeah, whenever I hear a coach say, do your job, I just immediately hear those clips of Bill Belichick with the Patriots yelling, do your job, do your job. That's one of the phrases that he always would yell, but it's very, very true. And the Steelers have the emotionally charged game coming up next against the Green Bay Packers. They're on Sunday Night Football, the Colts, the Chargers, Bengals again. We'll see how they look, and definitely looks like it's still going to be Joe Flacco in that game. Bears, Bills, then getting into those Ravens games. The schedule does get more difficult, but at least they do have a bit of a cushion despite the loss because of how much of a mess everybody else is. That's really what it is. I mean, everyone else is such a mess. The Steelers would really have to screw this up to not probably win this division this year. Todd Haley joining me on Mic Drop. Mike Asti here with Believe in Sirius XM. I do want to get your thoughts then on Mike Tomlin in general. The conversation after every single loss from Steeler fans is, well, this got to be the end for Mike Tomlin. It's 19 years in. There are some that almost just want to try something new just for the sake of trying something new. He hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. It's been a long time. That's why you bring Rodgers in. That's why you make the defensive changes. That's where the expectations are this year, regardless of everything else. And it does feel like in recent years, Tomlin's growing a little sick of the narrative with some comments that he's kind of throwing out there. Seems like he's a little tired of it. Where do you stand on Mike Tomlin's overall career with the Steelers? Obviously, it was great early on. You guys were there and won some games, but had some playoff disappointments. And then what it's been in recent years, and how much longer you think he's going to want to keep doing this. I mean, I think we both agree they're not going to fire him, but how much longer this goes? Do we get to year 20, 21, 22? He's still young, but this narrative goes on every day, every week, every year, no matter what. And probably until he wins a playoff game and gets the drought over, is going to forever go on. And I do think it bothers him some.
Yeah, I can't speak for Mike. If you're looking for a hot take, you're not going to get it from me.
I know kind of where you are. I
am a huge believer in Mike Tomlin. I have Yinzer friends all over. I had to tell them to stop texting me. Like I said, I mean, I've heard it. I heard it when I was there.
Yeah.
It's a rabid fan base that expects one thing, and that's to win Super Bowl trophies. As a kid, I thought the same. My dad's working for the Steelers. I'm like, oh, we're going to win another Super Bowl this year. I mean, you come to expect it, but it's really hard. You talked about my time there, some big playoff wins, but then unfortunately you got to play Tom Brady and the Patriots. So sometimes it's about the other teams too, so Mike Tomlin, man, I worked for Bill Parcells for 8 years. He's a friend of mine, one of the best, Hall of Famer. Mike Tomlin, in this day and age, smart, knows defense, knows offense, knows how to get the most out of each and every player and coach, which is just as important as getting it out of the players. So I was saying, and Mike T, I trust he's going to figure it out. So, they're in that process right now. They're in a good position, as you said, a little cushion. You got it in this league, Mike. You have to win the games you're supposed to win, and then just split the ones that are kind of a toss-up against really good teams. And then as you go through that process, you're you're hoping that your team continues to evolve and grow, that you get lucky with injuries and not losing critical pieces to what you're trying to do, because that can derail you. So I'm Mike Tomlin. All I would say to Steeler fans, I say, is what else? Who else you going to get?
Obviously it'd be an attractive job, but
yes, but he's tremendous at what he does. I mean, he is a true football coach. I've been with head coaches that know one side of the football and not the other. He played wide receiver in college. He gets offense. It's some of the most meaningful and meetings that I was ever a part of was him sitting in with our offensive staff. I mean, I grew so much from just hearing his perspective. That doesn't happen everywhere. So he's burning it at both ends constantly, one of the great energy bringers of all time. And when you're in the dark days of an NFL season and they get long and cold, and you need that leadership, and he is a true leader.
He's definitely a leader for sure. He's a leader of men. All of his players do say that. And if you look at the overall resume and who's already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and what their resumes look like, Tomlin's going to get there. He has a Hall of Fame resume. There's almost no way to deny it. Regardless if there's ever a playoff win again, the resume is the resume now, and the overall career is going to get him there. I'm sure there are some games he wishes he could have back. I'm sure there are games you wish you could have back when you were there, but he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But the other end of it is he's been in one spot so long, and it has been a while since the big win, which until that happens again, the Steelers fans are never going to calm this energy down. The playoff record now is below 500 despite the early career success in the early part of the tenure. Do you think there's ever a time that Tomlin walks away on his own accord? They're not going to fire him off the resume, but do you think there's ever a time that he says, let me try something new, let me go to my family, let me go to TV, let me get another job? At some point, does this end for Tomlin sooner rather than later? Where do you think he is on how much longer he wants to do this?
Like I said, I can't speak for Mike.
You can.
I can only tell you that at least while I was there and what I see, on Sundays and press conferences and all those things, right. This guy brings it in an amazing way every single day. I used to, I'd come in the morning and he'd put together a presentation for the team, and I'd be like, when are you doing this? You're putting these incredible clips and cut ups together with typing in there different, so 2 dogs, 1 bone, however, all the different ways he motivates guys to be at their best. So he can do whatever he wants. He really can. But I'm sure, and what I always felt from him was he's a true Pittsburgh Steeler through and through. He loves it. I'm sure you want to win more, obviously, but when that candle burns out, maybe he could do whatever he wants. So I don't have any idea.
Yeah, he doesn't obviously need the money, and I'm sure he'd get another job. That's always said that he'd be hired in 5 minutes. I'm sure that is actually true. At some point, maybe this does end, and I'm again sure the Steelers are not going to ever. You're never going to see the headline the Steelers fire him. If they do want this to end, it's going to be a mutual decision that I'm sure will be discussed with Tomlin. He's 53 years old. For NFL coaches, that is young. Still, he could have many more years to do this. The counter, I guess, is what the Eagles did with Andy Reid. They did eventually let him go. He still had the fire. He was still winning games there. They wanted to get over the hump. They eventually parted ways. They've won 2 championships with 2 different coaches since, and then he built a dynasty with the Chiefs. So you don't know that maybe moving on could end up being the best thing for Mike Tomlin if it ever would happen. But I don't see it happening tomorrow. I think I probably would be surprised if he's still wanting to be with the Steelers and do the same thing in, say, 5 years. Again, maybe not. You know him better than me personally, even though I've covered him. It just seems like at some point
you bring up Andy Reid. There's no telling what would have happened with Andy Reid if the Eagles didn't move on from him. So here, I think the bottom line, and again, I'm not speaking.
That's the example everybody uses, that they just maybe would want that similar change. Because it did work for both sides.
That's the easy thing to fall back on. We need a new voice. But I'm telling you, Mike, the voice is fine. I would think the bottom line, at least in my opinion, is as long as Mike Tomlin thinks he is getting the support needed, the funds needed to have a chance to win the ultimate goal, which is the Super Bowl, and it's really hard. Only one team gets it every year. And there's a lot of good quarterbacks in this league right now, a lot of obstacles. As long as he thinks he has a chance, I can't see why he'd not want to be in Pittsburgh trying to get that chance.
Yeah, because that's the thing. He has that support. And if you go to certain other franchises that maybe would have NFL head coaching opportunities right away, and I even know some of them. I was actually covering a game in Carolina a couple years ago and had one of their media members come over and say, I know for sure the Panthers owner loves Mike Tomlin. He'd get him within a second if he was ever available. It's like, does he really want to deal with that versus the support he's going to get with the Steelers? The support factor and knowing the Rooneys will give him whatever he wants because there's a cap, and it's not like Major League Baseball where they would be the Pirates. They have a chance within the system. They're not going to mess it up franchise-wise like, say, other franchises maybe would do. We talked about the Jets, for example. You're dealing with maybe one of those if you're getting a head coaching opportunity that on an open job. So he might actually regret if he ever makes that decision on his own and want to keep pushing through with this franchise. And so he'll certainly get that support, and we'll see where it goes here. Todd Haley, mic drop with Believe here, Mike Asti here, as we're talking Mike Tomlin. We talked Steelers loss to the Bengals there in Thursday Night Football. And I'll let you out of here soon, but I do want to also ask you on something that's involving one of the teams you also coach. That's a topic around the NFL and really will never die because the national media doesn't want it to. And that's what's going on in Cleveland with their quarterback situation. They traded Joe Flacco after starting him this season. So now they're looking to the young kids. Dylan Gabriel, their starter, Shedeur Sanders is there. Everyone wants to talk about him. He was only a 5th-round pick. How would you handle that if you were involved in that situation? Because the media, the national media, is clearly pushing to see the 5th-round pick, as weird as that even sounds, because obviously who his father is. You have a fellow rookie that you're trying to groom. You're evaluating both of them this year. In all reality, you might be looking to the draft next year, and there are a lot of fans that kind of just want to punt the year and do that. But Stefanski also maybe just can't punt years, or who knows how long he'll be there. How would you handle that? What are your thoughts even on that situation? Because it's a topic that's never going to die for a team that is not winning, and it's become a drama of 2 rookies that may not even be there next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at it like this. I would say you thought enough of Dylan Gabriel to take him in the 3rd round. That means you thought more of him than you thought of Shedeur Sanders. So number one, I would have fought tooth and nail, and it might have got me fired like I got fired before, to not take the other guy, to not take Shedeur. I mean, if you only thought enough of him, take him in the 5th round.
You mean in the draft room, you would have been in there and been like, we shouldn't do this. We're going to open ourselves up for this problem.
You're creating problems. You know, the league is about trying to create as little divisiveness as you can within your building, within your team. And when you do that, it's now if you'd taken one in the 1st, one in the 2nd, and that's happened before, like the Redskins when they were the Redskins taking, Robert Griffith III and then Cousins. That's a little different when you're talking 1st round and a 3rd round, a little different. I mean, we're talking back end of the draft. Half those picks don't work out. It probably has a much better chance at working out at a different position than quarterback when you start talking 5th, 6th, 7th round. I mean, there's a couple exceptions, I know, but over time, you're not finding, big-time quarterbacks at that spot unless their name's Tom Brady or Brock Purdy. So it's easier to draft a backup linebacker that helps you on special teams or a backup running back that does the same than to find a quarterback in that area. So I just wouldn't have done it. I would have fought it as hard as I could.
Do you think they just couldn't help it in the fact that he slid so far in the draft? They admitted they didn't love him enough to do the earlier rounds, but when he's still out there and the division rival says no because he put it out there that he wanted to go to the Ravens, do you think Andrew Berry was just sitting there saying we can't now not do it? Because why not try with at least a talented quarterback. But you did take Gabriel 2 rounds earlier, who also was successful in college. More so,
it just doesn't make sense to me, Mike. I don't know what went on. There's different rumors that the owner spoke up, that there was pushing coming from some other direction. But the bottom line is, if you're taking a guy just because he's still there, I mean, at that position, not all positions, there's some guys that maybe had trouble, got in trouble or had issues that have a lot of talent that you say, all right, well, we can't risk a first or second round pick, but maybe we'll use a third. I mean, that comes up all the time. But that wasn't the issue here. I mean, he wasn't a problem child, at Colorado. So no. I don't know. Like I said, it's
they kind of did put themselves in this situation for sure. And then, they started the season with Flacco, but I don't think anybody thought they were going to be able to avoid this situation eventually happening. Eventually, Shedeur is going to start a game because they're going to keep losing, and it's even going to be more of a thing. Now, once he's on the team, though, and as you mentioned, you would have fought tooth and nail, but you would have been outruled maybe as the OC, or even if you were the head coach, maybe the ownership would have overruled you. And you're saddled with him. I'm sure you've been saddled with players that maybe you wish weren't there before in your career. What advice then would you be giving Shedeur Sanders in those meetings? Because he's not playing right now, but they didn't even make him the backup after trading Flacco right away. They kept him there as QB3. The national media talks about him every day. And then, as you probably saw, he did the interview where he mimed and didn't even speak, and then that became a thing, and clearly he's bothered by this, and you could argue handling things immaturely. What would your advice be to Shedeur on your roster to appease him in a way that wouldn't keep this drama going, but would also help your team, since you admitted your first goal in a way is to calm down the freaking noise that will not calm down?
Yeah, I feel bad for the kid. I really do. Very difficult situation now.
Yeah, there's some
of it created, with, filming yourself on draft day. I mean, you're asking for problems if it doesn't go the way you want it to go. But I feel for him. I mean, not an easy situation. So not being there, Mike, I don't know what he looks like in meetings. I don't know what he looks like on the practice field.
Sure.
I saw the same little sample size we saw in the preseason that everybody saw. So, what's clear to me is they believe in Dillon Gabriel, and they probably have some reservations about Shedeur, and that's just life in the NFL. Every guy's competing. We saw Kenny Pickett, try to get out of Pittsburgh. That disappointed me. Why not stay and fight and compete? So at least he's there. At least he's working. Now, what that looks like, I don't know, but it just is what it is. There's a lot of tough situations in the NFL.
Yeah. And that was a first-round pick, whether you think Pickett should have been there or not. In comparison, now a fifth-rounder. There's really no example of a fifth-round pick being this scrutinized every day by the national media. So you do have to feel for him in that way. But the other end of it is, and I brought this up too, some of this, you mentioned filming yourself on draft night. I mean, Colorado, which has some history to it, even though it's been a while, they retire his number. He didn't even win a bowl game there. They had 4 wins the first year. His numbers were solid, but it's not like he set a record there. His number gets retired on the press box. They haven't even retired players who won the national championship there 30 years ago yet. So when you do that, obviously it's going to bring attention. That's not really necessarily his fault. That was his dad. But come on. So you mime an interview, like clearly you're unhappy in a way, and you don't want anything said, and that's going to be a story. But it is very bizarre for this to be the life of a fifth-round quarterback. Evaluating them, though, I have to ask you, I know you're not there every day, but from what you've seen from Colorado going into the draft, from even now, from preseason and when he has been out there, Dillon Gabriel started NFL games. We saw him in college. How would you evaluate the two of them? Who do you think is legitimately the better quarterback right now that you would like to evaluate this year if you're in that organization before they maybe draft again, just on the field? Only football, where is your eye?
I've watched a few games, in college, and then obviously the preseason stuff. Yeah. I just see this guy's talented. I mean, he can throw the football. Again, that's not what quarterbacking is just about. You have to have an NFL arm, but it's so many other things. I just see I saw a lot of off schedule big plays, but not a lot that happened with timing, like kind of what we saw with Joe Flacco and Aaron last night, where the ball's coming out. We see it with Dillon Gabriel. So I think if you're putting me against it, I would say Dillon Gabriel. Do I love the size? No, but he plays with a rhythm. The ball comes out that tells me he's paying attention. He knows what he's seeing. He understands the offense. Not getting a ton of help from the perimeter. We saw Njoku dropping the ball. Receivers doing it. Jerry Jeudy, all those things. So he's getting like the kind of help that Flacco was getting there. So, but I like Dillon Gabriel. I think, he can throw it from the pocket. I don't see that with Kyler Murray, as talented as he is.
Okay.
One of the issues out there, I think, with Marvin Harrison Jr. is, for that X receiver to get the ball, like we used to throw it to AB 20, 23 times a game, you got to have a big quarterback that can stand in the pocket. Well, Dillon's not tall, but he seems to get around it. He finds throwing lanes a little more Drew Brees-like, I would say, not putting him in that category.
That'll be a hot take that'll go out there. Yeah,
but he I think the kid's he's got talent. He can throw, and he looks like he's on it mentally most of the time.
Yeah, I guess the advantage for Shedeur, certainly going to college, maybe would be arguing there's a little bit more mobility there. But it's not like he's a running dual threat quarterback necessarily. People sometimes get that confused. He's a little more mobile, but yeah, there definitely are weaknesses there and issues there that are probably why he fell in the draft. As regardless of off the field and personality, if you are good enough to exceed all of that and be productive, and teams think you at the quarterback position that you can be a franchise guy right away, they're not going to let you linger to the 5th round just because they're worried about an interview. They're going to say, we want to win some games and we'll try to calm down the noise later on. There's a reason
the Patriots were wrong on Tom Brady.
They were. Yeah, everybody was wrong, including the Patriots. That's not brought up as much in the documentaries. They also swung and missed and avoided him and didn't take him for many rounds before he eventually was selected there. For sure. Todd, I definitely appreciate you doing this. I definitely appreciate the time. Have to have you on again sometime for sure. We're both part of Steel City Sunday. Maybe we'll get on that together as we're on different segments right now. But I appreciate it, man. You said you weren't going to drop a hot take on Tomlin. Do you have a hot take? Any hot takes you want to drop before?
No hot takes coming here, Mike.
No hot takes right now. Okay, we'll see. We'll see if we get a hot take from Todd Haley on a future show. But Todd Haley, former Steelers offensive coordinator, former head coach in the NFL, former coach in general, of course, has a lineage there. Grew up a Steeler fan, current host, Sirius XM. We're going to see you back on an NFL sideline? Any teasing you can give me that you want to get back on an NFL sideline, or thoughts about that at all?
I did it for a long time, Mike. I had the time of my life, did some really good things. But I'm enjoying this media. It's much more fun to be critical of people than it is to be criticized. So, what I'd say to the Yinzers out there, what I say to my friends, deep breaths, relax. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, you definitely got to do that. And as you know, the Yinzers struggle at the deep breaths and not freaking out and relaxing for sure. But you're still young enough, man. You still have a passion for this and still know the game. I think it could be an opportunity if you want one at some point, if you put it out there. It's a lot of who knows? I'm not going to put your age out there, even though I do know it. But you're not too over the hill to be able to go back in there if you want. It could happen. There are coaches who've accomplished less that are still going right now, with a lot of offenses that are struggling around the league, to say the very least. Again, Todd Haley there joining me on Mic Drop. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Mike.
Yep. Todd Haley, again, former NFL coach, head coach back with the Chiefs there for a couple years, Steeler offensive coordinator for sure. Time with the Browns and really around the docket, of course, Chicago Bears, Jets way back, Arizona Cardinals, and now doing the media thing as he is a host with Sirius XM, a legit every day 3 hours there. He's not just doing a pod that's put on Sirius XM like me. He's legit a Sirius XM host there and spitting his wisdom. And then also now a part with me and many colleagues in the Pittsburgh media scene, Paul Zeiss, John Phillips, Jerry DePaula, recently retired from the Tribune Review, a colleague of mine when I was with the Trib, John Fedko, kind of a quasi former colleague of mine when I was with WPXI. You may know the Fedko phone zone that I grew up with. He's a legend in this area. He's a part of Steel City Sunday. John Phillips hosts, and we are a part of Steel City Sunday. Todd Haley, now a part of the group and a part of the fold as well. So kind of cool for sure. Once again, thanks to Todd Haley for jumping aboard as we talked about the Thursday night football game, both the Flacco, the Rodgers side, Steelers and Bengals side. What's going on with the perception and the narrative always swirling around Mike Tomlin? Todd Haley's still a Mike Tomlin guy all these years later. And what's even going on with the Browns and how they're handling Shedeur Sanders and that mess as well. And Todd Haley wouldn't even have drafted Shedeur. And if you wanted to avoid this drama, that makes some sense, especially if you're going to be drafting another quarterback again next year. Feels like they stepped in it. And, there's different thoughts on why, but he slid in the draft for a reason. They're not just going to avoid a guy who could be a franchise guy immediately. And, I do feel bad for Shedeur in a way that Todd Haley mentioned, but a lot of this is also self-inflicted from him, his father, let's be honest, and everybody else around him in his camp. Again, thanks to Todd Haley for jumping aboard here. This has been Mic Drop, made possible by the Believe Network, available everywhere you get your podcasts and SiriusXM. Stay tuned for more of these. Have to absolutely get Todd back on here. Fun conversation, to say the least.